slide deck in Kaltura and the screen share.
Okay.
All right, we're getting right at 2 o'clock. So we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. Today, we are in session 10 of the fall 2020 xAPI cohort. Today, we have Wendy Morgan, who's going to talk about strategic applications of xAPI data. Welcome, Wendy. Thanks for being here today. If you are presenting on behalf of your team today, please type me in the chat so that our producers can be ready to give you mic access after our presentation. As of right now, we have 875 folks registered for the fall cohort. We have 41 folks registered for spring 2021 cohort, and we have 135 people registered for the xAPI party. So there are lots of folks interested in xAPI and be a part of our community. So welcome, welcome. Today we have myself, Jess Jackson, behind the mic. I am your xAPI cohort host, and we also have Aaron and Jamie, who are our producers. So if you need any support or any help getting your mic access and you're presenting on behalf of your team, Jamie or Aaron can help you do that. Today, we're going to talk about the strategic use of xAPI data with Wendy Morgan. And then next week, we jump into project team demos. So we have 2 weeks of project team demos. Each week has 3 slots available for teams to present out. We still have 2 available slots for next week. So if your team is interested in presenting, during next week's cohort session, please let me know in Slack. I will be following up in Slack to see if there's any interest. And then the same with on the 19th, we have 3 open slots. These presentations are online during New Row, right here on our weekly 2 p.m. sessions. The presentations are 20 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes for a presentation, plus some time for questions. They do generally include some slides. You can choose to do a screen share and do a live demo of your functionality if you wish. Your project does not have to be perfect or completely finished. You can share what your team has accomplished, what you learned, and get feedback from the cohort community on your project so that you can keep building and keep going. So please, 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 if you're interested in presenting, we will love to have you present in the next 2 weeks. With that, I'm going to pass over the screen and the mic to Wendy Morgan, who's here with the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and she's going to share a little bit about some strategic uses of xAPI data. Thanks for being here today, Wendy.
Thank you, and thank you for giving the entire name of my institution so that I don't have to do that. That's lovely. It's a mouthful. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me for a discussion of strategic use of xAPI data. I am actually going to get started with just a little bit of interaction. So let's see if we can get this going. All right, so we're looking, I'm not seeing it, but I'm seeing words come in. Jess, as my helpful person, we just did this, but I'm not seeing it. Is it showing up somewhere that I'm not able to check out?
I'm not seeing the screen share right now, but I was seeing a dial showing that it's loading.
Okay, let me try something else. We literally just did this right before this presentation. It's working beautifully, and now I'm not so it says it is sharing, but it is not sharing. So let me try again. And all right,
there it is.
Yay! So if you could go to poll everywhere, there's the little URL there. What I want to hear from you all is, what do you see as the greatest benefit of xAPI? And already I've got a couple of terms coming in, and I have no idea how you guys knew to go here, but interoperability and flexibility have been already entered in there. And this is a word cloud, so it would be best if you just put in one word if possible. We'll have the opportunity to put in others. So you can do this with text or just on another tab. Text could be really easy if you've got your phone right there. But if you could join in and just tell me, what do you think is the greatest benefit of xAPI? That'd be really helpful. Another for interoperability. Great, so flexibility, interoperability, performance. Lots of data, you can have it real time. Great, I love that. Insights, yes. So it's really flexible, where there's a lot that we can do with xAPI. We can have a lot more insights because we can get, a lot of more line of sight into things, might help drive improvement. I love this, that's great. It's comprehensive. Yes, very good. Oh, so there's a lot of really great stuff that xAPI brings to our ability to drive learner performance, right? So let me see if I can. And what we're going to do, we're going to go to the next one and share that. So with all of that awesome stuff, why isn't it more common? And this is not a word cloud, this is actually a word stream. So feel free to put in phrases or even whole sentences if it will help you get across your thoughts. So we've got all this awesome stuff. Why isn't this everywhere? Why isn't everybody using this? Lack of skills and knowledge. It's the unknown, meaning you don't know why, or it is the unknown to organizations. Yep, could be costly. There's an implementation curve. Unaware of value. It's not off the shelf yet. Yeah, so there's kind of an innovation curve. Anyone else? Maybe ethical issues with so much tracking, perhaps, maybe. All right, I am going to move on to actually the next one, and this is a ranking exercise. So these are typical reasons that you might hear that xAPI is not more common. What do you think is the top one? So rank them. And I think you just drag to rank. Or I don't know exactly how it works on the cell phone, but maybe you put in the one. But what's the top reason? What do you think is out of these reasons, which ones are the top? Yeah, you can't drag in iOS. What can you do in, there we go, first. So there's cost, lack of strategy, a strategic decision. So waiting to see what people say. Helen, I appreciate that you put lack of strategy into the chat. If for whatever reason you're unable to interact with this poll everywhere, feel free to put it in the chat. It'll still be, we'll still count you. No worries. No points off. I'll wait just a couple of seconds and see if we've got all the answers from folks who want to participate. I see that the last so far right now is that it is a strategic decision not to use xAPI because it will not help. I see that people think that that is not probably the top reason. And the top reasons are at least one of the other three. So cost, skill, and then the idea that the value is not understood. We saw those in the word stream too, right? And what I would argue is if there is a clear link between implementation of xAPI infrastructure to let us get that rich data and furthering organizational goals, then all of a sudden, if that value is very clear, it's not going to be too expensive and you're going to be able to hire for the skill or train for the skill. So I think we see that cost and skill are reasons very often that are given for why xAPI is not more common, but those things are dependent on value. It's only too costly if it's not, you're not going to get ROI on that investment. And you only have a lack of skill if it's not worth investing in developing that skill. So the strategic value of xAPI is still probably the top reason I believe that xAPI is not more common. You've got so much data, and Jess, I think we're ready to put the deck back up now that we've gotten past the poll everywhere. Great. Okay, so with that, I'm going to give a shameless plug to an article I published in Learning Solutions magazine about the science of instructional strategy. And I think, you know, the only way that you're going to know whether anything is working is if you have a good strategy. And that's even more so for xAPI data because there's just so much of it. If you have a ton of data that you're just swimming in and you don't know what you're doing with any of it, then you're not going to be able to utilize it. But if you have a really good strategy for what you're doing and why you need the data that you're collecting, it's not going to feel like data overwhelm. It's going to feel like the right data because you're able to basically do the analyses or perform the correlations that you need. But my animations are not working very well with that. So I'm actually going to see if I can try this one more time. Is it working? Am I able to share?
Not seeing it yet.
Yeah. I am not happy with this desktop share thing.
It's not giving us the best time.
No, it is not. It is absolutely not. Okay, well, regardless, I will just go ahead and put the deck back up. I'll deal with it. Okay. So behind this, it was supposed to be kind of like a, hey, you know, a little animation to put the value on what I'm saying. But as a background for our organization for FPG, it's a really unique organization. So as a child, as a research institution of any kind, it basically is a conglomeration of many different independently funded projects because all of our projects are on soft money. They're all grant funded. So they all have different and independent audiences and websites and data. They don't need to share any of that stuff because they all have different goals, and all of their training, their PD or their technical assistance or any of that is all external. It's community focused. And even more, most grants have a budget limitation where they don't have a budget line for project-specific technical infrastructure because they don't want to buy stuff for the projects. They want to buy project work to help the communities that they're serving. So for FPG, FPG is a really not a good environment for an LMS anyway, because you're not going to want to be driving people to an LMS that doesn't seem connected to the project. You want them to be driving them to the project website. So for FPG, because there's all these various and sundry organizations, it's not a good fit for an LMS regardless. And then it's also the learner activity data that we need to collect from FPG needs to be really conceptually meaningful. It needs to reflect learner activity within very custom interactions, because it needs to support research and in particular statistical analysis with meaningful variables. And it also needs to provide meaningful information about learner strengths and weaknesses to tailor follow-up blended learning. And I'm going to be talking more about those specifics as we move forward to talk about some actual case studies of projects within FPG. But the main point here is that for FPG as an organization, there is a high need for customizable data. So xAPI is a much better fit in this organizational context than SCORM is. So we're really operating within a unique context. I think that a lot of business contexts don't have that initial reason to go to an LRS with xAPI, and so there may not be the perceived reason or cost value for sort of learning the lessons that you need to as you get through figuring out how to implement, how to use what you've implemented. So we were in a fairly unique situation that it was already really clear that that's what we needed to do. So I want to put that up front and say this was a very unique context, and within that context, I'd like to go through 3 case studies, so 3 projects at FPG. One is an implementation science project, the next is Michigan Public Schools, and the third will be an autism intervention project. And for each, I'm going to go through sort of 4 steps, if you will, or 4 elements. What we planned to do, what we implemented after the plan, what our next steps will be, and then I'm just going to kind of pause after each for thoughts and questions that you might have, either about just project specific or maybe ideas that you have that might help further things. We'll just take a small pause after each. So the first project is Impact Center project. An Impact Center is a sort of a subdivision, if you will, of FPG. The implementation capacity for P, and this project supports the implementation of an evidence-based program called P for lead agencies and county coalitions of agencies scaling up P across their counties, and this is throughout North and South Carolina. So their challenges were that to go out and support all of these county sites is expensive and it's time consuming. And because implementation work can be overwhelming and tedious, sometimes the sites were not very engaged or motivated. So our planned solution was really a personalized or tailored kind of blended learning. So we decided we would create some e-learning pre-work before site teams go out that is really highly interactive and engaging so that the site teams are kind of primed to be dealing with the concepts that the site teams would be working with. That it would also collect customized and meaningful learner data to inform really personalized and tailored site support to make that site support more efficient and more effective, so you're really getting more out of every moment that you're there. So the first step in the plan was the design and development of like an online curriculum of e-learning lessons, which we also call modules. So these modules were designed to be as engaging as they could be, employing gamification elements like avatar, like you see up here, and also story or a sort of a narrative flowing through the modules, and then conveying didactic information with interesting approaches like whiteboard video or just simple animation, and to be as effective as possible by providing some interactive hands-on engagement with the real-world problems and concepts that sites are going to have to deal with. And then the SMEs that we worked with on the project helped to identify the most useful learner activity data to pull in to inform site work. And then at the end of each of these modules, the learners receive a kind of dynamically produced set of personal feedback. We call these the handouts from the modules, and oftentimes they're designed to also be used on site with the site support team, like this one, where they have a response and then they talk about this response with their site support team and maybe start to edit or sort of workshop that response. And then meanwhile, the implementation specialist can also see the specific actions taken by each of the learners as they progress through the module. This is a screenshot of the sort of query of the LRS database that we have. We also, I just want to sort of say, because we use Storyline to create our interactive e-learning, and because it sort of produces all this default experienced data, all these experience statements, we just removed all of those. We don't collect any of that stuff because it's just kind of junking up our data set. We want exactly what we want, so we put that in specifically, and we don't have any of the rest of the stuff. And then for those wanting a deeper dive of what each one of those data lines is, we have documentation showing the variables that are collected from each slide throughout our e-learning. And then in our first development iteration, we also created a detailed 8-page on-site lesson plan guiding providers through the best way to tailor their on-site plans depending on the learner data. And guess what we learned about that? Well, we learned that it was too complex and not practical enough for on-site support teams, that the data and then the follow-up instructions were just, it was like all too much. So we devised a much simpler data visualization based on the learning objectives. So this is sort of each learning objective, and then we have just a red, yellow, green light visualization on how the learners are doing through each of these learning objectives. And then whatever text entry they put in is also reported. And we have no particular set of instructions for follow-up. But we do have a table of objectives, possible learning objectives that we all agree upon before producing really any of the materials. And so this approach creates both more clarity around the alignment of the e-learning modules and module data with other work that they're doing, as well as providing a list of other supports and tools that they can utilize to continue to follow up on the learning objectives that they get red or yellow data visualizations about. So our next steps at this point are maybe we want group or site reports. We're still kind of talking about whether that would be helpful for the site support team or what they want. And in general, just continuing to get more helpful feedback to drive evolution of how we are going to be utilizing this data. And with that, I want to just kind of pause for a moment and see, if you have any thoughts or questions, any thoughts maybe about other things that we could do that might help this goal of tailoring our site support to be very effective or efficient, or just if you have questions about the project or any other things that you might want to ask or say. And feel free to just put it right in the chat. Okay, if there are no questions or comments, then we'll move forward and we'll go to the next case study. And so in academia, you always have acronyms, but I have to say this acronym is one of my faves because there's an acronym within the acronym. So the acronym is MIMTSS, and then when you spell that out, it's Michigan's MTSS, Technical Assistance Center. So you still need the MTSS part, which is Multi-Tiered System of Support. So really what we've got is a Technical Assistance Center in Michigan supporting Michigan public schools. And the goal of this particular part of this project that I'm going to be talking to you about is that they want schools to be implementing PBIS, or positive behavioral interventions and supports effectively. So their challenges are that they find that schools are often skeptical of the effectiveness of PBIS, positive behavioral interventions and supports, and also that there's not enough support for school level coaches. So there's often, each school will have a coach that is responsible for helping that school scale up PBIS, and that coach doesn't have enough tools or support to be able to do it effectively. So our planned solution is really to try to affect like a paradigm shift in schools about PBIS, and also to provide a little bit more support. So we decided we would create some hands-on learning to allow people to experience the effects of PBIS firsthand. We would collect some pre and post data, and then we would also provide school level coach instructor-led materials that are personalized according to the learner data. And again, my animations won't work, so we'll just have to deal with what we do have. But we created a choose your own adventure e-learning where the first choice, which you don't see here, but the first choice was whether they would have a full PBIS implementation, no PBIS implementation, or just the necessary elements, or like just the basic PBIS implementation, because that's what most schools try to do. And then what we did was we created a whole sort of choose your own adventure series of experiences and choices that we thought were realistic to what schools actually do experience. And the idea is to just give a realistic feel for the consequences of choices as time goes on, and then allow them to kind of go back and choose many different things to have many different experiences. And the lesson begins and ends with a ranking activity so it functions like a pre-post test. So they're basically given a difficult situation and then asked, what do you think is going to be the most effective way to deal with this? And then they have 6 options that they rank, and those are 2 options within 3 different types of approaches. So one would be a positive approach or a positive response within the control of the staff, so like very PBIS aligned. The other would be a punitive response within the control of the staff. And then the third would be sort of a no response where you sort of blame the behavior on families or say that the kids should know better. And then we provide a data visualization about those rankings. So we've got the pre-test rankings with positive on the top, punitive in the middle, and responses outside of staff control on the bottom. And then on the right column there is the post-test rankings with positive, punitive, and responses outside of staff control. And depending on where the post-test lies, so what is their highest rank in the post-test is the highest rank, positive, punitive, or outside of staff control, they would be provided with specific school-level coach ILT materials that address their staff's preference or likely response pattern. So here's an example of materials for a school coach. This one is for responses outside of staff control. And we give them, the purpose of this particular meeting. We've got day 1 and day 3, because that's where the coaches needed the most support. So they would give them the purpose of the meeting. We've got an agenda. We provide them with a normalizing script. And then we also have some videos that actually demonstrate how students experience these response patterns. So how do students experience PBIS? How do they experience punitive responses? And how do they experience the kind of no response response? And then we also have a follow-up with answers to frequently asked questions. So we're hoping that this data will help, this pre and post data for this paradigm shift training will help move things forward. And as we look toward next steps, I'm thinking, and we're wondering whether there's a simpler way of conveying these results. Do we just not provide all that data and just tell them which aspect there is, or do we allow them a little bit more insight into the data? And we're actually just getting started with this. So the first schools will start training on this actually this month. And we're hoping that as it becomes more more used, that we'll just get more feedback, and that'll help drive some of the evolution for that. So I'm going to pause there again and just see, are there any thoughts or questions, ideas for us about that particular case study? Okay, well, then I'm going to move on. So Affirm for Professionals, Autism-Focused Intervention Resources and Modules. Their challenge is that students with autism are primarily instructed, the interventionists are primarily paraprofessionals that have little to no training. So we're gonna try to provide some free universal training online, and then also design and test the method of providing more intensive training. So we provided online learning modules that addressed planning, using, and monitoring 6 different evidence-based practices. This is the planning phase. They have the opportunity to practice planning by utilizing a planning guide and having a virtual conversation with their supervising teacher. Then they are able to watch a professional use the evidence-based practice with fidelity and then rate the fidelity of use by a second one. And then they have the opportunity to use it firsthand and monitor by collecting data on their target student. And when I say data in this case, I don't mean the data we collect. I mean the data we collect about the data they collect. So what we can really do is compare their behavior in this virtual environment to how they behave afterward. So within these modules, what we do is we delineate the steps of every one of these behaviors, and we identify those steps as specific learning objectives. And we look closely at the way in which the paraprofessionals behave within this sort of controlled virtual setting, as well as before and afterward in the classroom. And this is a look at sort of some of the data that we're collecting. This would be for plan. We're collecting 6 variables, which are 2 aspects of each of the goals, plan, use, and monitor. And you can see these are all interactions that fall into each one of these 2 subcategories of plan, and this is how we score them and how we apply those scores to categories, and then some development notes to keep us organized. And then the data is summarized and provided in personal learner feedback at the end of the module, which is really valuable for universal training especially, but also good for follow-up. And we also do pre-post tests. So while all the module data that we're collecting might be formative, these can be summative. And this one is designed to measure the degree to which paras attribute the behavior of students with autism to the students themselves, so like an internal attribution versus the teacher or environment as they learn more about autism and how EPBs support it. And we also provide custom reports to the researchers. So this is a query where each user is a row and each one of our variables is a column. So data is really kind of driving this whole case study. We provide personalized feedback to learners. We define discrete variables for analysis, and we allow a lot of research potential by assessing the relationships between learner activities and other goals like fidelity of practice and knowledge gain. So for us, the next steps, again, we wonder if there would be a way to do this through simpler data collection, because this data collection nearly killed my whole team. So what is the data that matters the most? Can we focus our efforts on the data points that we find really drive things? And again, just as I'll be really interested to know the feedback we get as we make some of the universal training more public. We're just launching we're just about to launch the 4th of 6 modules now publicly. And the traffic it gets is crazy, like 100,000 people using them. So it'll be interesting to see what the feedback was. was that, yes, so through the chat, was the UNC data collection for these studies via xAPI. I mean, the learner activity data from the e-learning modules was xAPI, yes. The rest of the data collection was, I think we just utilized Qualtrics and surveys or checklists and things by either observers or participants on iPad forms. So we're utilizing both sets of data. Yeah, absolutely. So this is the time for any questions or comments. I think I actually stayed to time. So even with the sharing issues. Did I think about moving the survey data to xAPI? You know, we are really considering all kinds of things as we use more xAPI and we get more familiar with what we can do with queries and custom reports and things. I think we're still really learning more and more about what we're going to be doing. But my guess is that the ease of Qualtrics and the ability to be able to do that survey offline and not have to worry about it connecting, I think there's probably less appetite for moving Qualtrics surveys into xAPI. It's not with an X. It's a CS, but it's just a survey software that a lot of universities use because it's just very easy peasy. But you can't use it in the e-learning module.
Well, thank you so much, Wendy.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
These were really rich and I think a different way of thinking about how to use xAPI than what we've been seeing. So thank you.
Absolutely, my pleasure entirely.
All right. So we're gonna transition back into team updates. So I've seen in the chat that we have HR Open, Team Zoom, and Team Storyline engagement with speakers today. I'm going to share my screen and pull up our GitHub updates so that we can hop into other updates that might be in. So Team Adaptive Learning didn't submit an update this week. Team Down Under added the ability to right-click on their map and added a simulation incident. They added the QR generator to generate a link and a QR code to pass the crew and simulation to be displayed in the app. They have a no need check-in to create a simulation incident. And then they are working on the video script for the xAPI party. And they ordered team polo shirts for their inaugural Team Down Under. Team Early Childhood Education continued to explore xAPI solutions for capturing nature play statements. They looked at progressions towards the GBL xAPI ecosystem. They examined how CAS assertions could be applied and explored the assessment tools for assessing connection to nature. What they hope to accomplish in the next week is to study the xAPI vocab server and pull together with research for their presentation. If they need support, they will reach out to individuals as needed. Team HR Open, I believe Brian is on the line to present for Team HR Open.
Updated. Hi, this is Brian Duck with Team HR Open. Jim is out on personal family duty right now. I believe his son's running a marathon as a cross-country runner. So Team HR Open is in the process of writing out case studies or other documentation about how we want to validate the assessments profile and what implementation we want to see within the HR Open standard. So again, we're still looking for additional input from cohort members. And tomorrow we're going to host more of a dynamic question and answer session. There's going to be a few of us online. Like I mentioned, Jim is out this week, so he won't be available, but there's a couple others of us that are meeting tomorrow at 10. So if you've got some curiosity around how assessments may integrate in with xAPI and HR Open, tomorrow would be a good session to make. The URL, again, is in our Slack channel. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Team storyline engagement. I think that Matt was on the line to give the update there. I think you're loading, Matt. All right. While we wait for Matt's audio and video to load, Team Zoom, I think that Brian was on the line for Team Zoom.
Hi, Jess.
Hi, Brian. I can hear you.
Awesome. So we have started the process of parsing out the transcript data that comes from Zoom recordings to get an idea of who was speaking, what they said, and for how long. So we've got that started. It's a little bit of a manual process right now. So for the next week, we're hoping to automate that. It'll involve getting a webhook from Zoom with that the transcript is ready, and then developing the code that then will then parse out that information. And then finally, the last step is then taking that information and creating some xAPI statements based on either how long someone spoke during a meeting, how often they spoke, things like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. And I think you're all loaded up, Matt. So I'm going to go back to storyline engagement. Well, it looks like we might be experiencing some delays with Matt, so I'll hop into Team Pebble while that is loading. Team Pebble, Kristen emailed to let me know that there's not an update for this week, and that they'll be doing some work in the next week while they're doing some things out. Some other things. They're catching up on other things this week, but there'll be an update next week. Matt, are you ready? Okay, I'll just go ahead and read this update this week, unless I think you're loading. So Matt and Kara went over their storylines and their statements. The team is continuing to build out storyline content and moving forward with the statements, and they're reviewing resources and tutorials that are shared in Slack. What they hope to accomplish in the next week is to continue with storyline content development and statements to share with the team, and create a master storyline file to consolidate the content and test the statements. And if there's anything I missed, Matt, go ahead and put that in the chat. I see in there. I think that those are all of the updates that we have this week. If there is a team that we missed, go ahead and let us know in the chat. But otherwise, we are moving into project team demos next week, and we have 2 teams that have signed up. So we have one more spot that's open next week. If you are interested in presenting out, you do not need to have your project team your project demo perfect. It is 20 minutes, so about 12 to 15 minutes for presentation plus questions. If you are interested in presenting, please let me know in Slack or send me an email. And then the next week after that, on the 19th, November 19th, we have 2 slots that are available there. We just had 1 team sign up, so we still have room for 2 more teams on November 19th as well. Again, our party is December 11th. This is another chance for you to engage with the community as a participant. So you can register as a participant with the link there. You can also present. So this is a longer, you can, while the team demos on Cohort are 15 to 20 minutes, the proposals for the party are like 40 minutes of presentation. So you have more time to present out. And it's a really great professional development opportunity. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can email our help desk, or you can message me in Slack. With that, have an awesome, awesome day, and we will see you back here next week.